good to see you all. Good to see some friendly faces back there, too, that I've seen before. We left last week with we couldn't finish the episode because there was just too much to talk about. So this week we're going to finish what we talked about last week. Just as the Council of Trent finishes in 1563, the church is now has a new outcropping of enthusiasm, a new militant spirit, ready to take on and repair some of the losses that they had before. Now with a new gusto and energy, the church is ready to go. We had some, after a number of bad popes, now we have a number of popes that are very good, very enthusiastic. But while this is going on, before we even got a chance to get out of the starting gate, all of a sudden a new challenge comes in from the Muslims, from the Turkish Empire. Serious challenge. Jihad is proclaimed. There's calls being made. St. Peter's is being built. And the Sultan of Turkey says, boy, this would be, it's supposed to be the largest church in the world. It'll be the largest mosque in the world. We're going to take it over. And so this is, these are the critical years. 2 years after the end of the Council of Trent, a new movement of a gigantic empire is about to take place. An empire that's very hostile to Christianity. An empire that grows a lot, almost like kind of a blob. Okay, it absorbs the territories that it takes, enslaves the people, puts them into service for itself. For example, one of the taxes that the Ottoman Empire would demand was taxation of your children. Okay, they would come through when you least expected. They'd just take your children away, and you'd never see them again. They'd be brought up as special servants of Allah, brainwashed or killed if they weren't going to be brainwashed, and turned into fighters like Janissaries. Okay, these Janissaries where people were not even allowed to be married. Okay, they were supposed to be totally dedicated to the advancement of Islam at the cost of their lives. They would have a right to privileges from conquered people, but not to marry them. Okay, so they could use them, but not marry them. And it's very serious. Other people would be hauled in as slaves, galley slaves. So so their armies would get bigger and bigger as they took over more and more territory. Here is a picture of the Ottoman Empire, just about as it existed, at the time that we're at issue here. Notice they're sweeping over the Balkan Peninsula all the way. Later, they make forays all the way up to Vienna. But there was still an area blocking them from attacking the heartland of Europe. There were a couple of islands that were still in the hands that had never left the hands of the Christians ever since the time of the Crusades. Cyprus, okay, which was Cyprus and Crete, which were under the control of Venice. And then also that right here, just right where my dot is a very beautiful and interesting island of Rhodes. Where back in ancient times, the famous Colossus of Rhodes was there. This was the biggest problem as far as they were concerned, okay, because Rhodes was the bailiwick and the headquarters and the little principality of the Knights of Rhodes, the Knights of St. John, okay, who was one of the last of the crusading orders, who were people, an interesting hybrid between a military special forces and a religious order, because they took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but they were also trained very vigorously in the arts of war and also the arts of healing, very interestingly. Now, as long as the Christians held these outposts, they could kind of keep the Ottomans at bay from sea expansion, because you never knew who was going to hit them in the back. So that is something that the Ottomans and the Sultans wanted to get rid of at all costs. So a call for jihad was made. Let's knock these outposts, these infidel outposts out, and let's sweep over and finally bring Islam, submission, to the whole world. And to give you a kind of a flavor, okay, of the Islamic spirit, as if we weren't familiar with it a little bit enough, let's see a photographic picture of it here.
Oh, beloveds, O men of the desert, my Lord Muhammad, blessings and peace be upon him, commands me to speak. For I am the Mahdi, the expected one, and I am sprung from the forehead of the family of my Lord Muhammad, blessings be upon him. Oh, my beloveds, did I not promise thee a miracle would fall from heaven from the Prophet Muhammad? And was not this so? Ye fight a holy war against the fat and the corrupt and the sinful and the unbelieving. Ye fight a war to restore to a disobedient, forgetful world the laws and commands of the Prophet Muhammad. Blessings and peace be upon him, whose instrument on earth I am. Exult ye not that men are dead, since more must die tomorrow. Oh, my beloveds, in a vision the Prophet Muhammad has instructed me, let mountain and desert tremble, let cities shudder, and let the fat and the rich and the corrupt in far places mark this moment and turn in fear of all those miracles to come. And let none in all Islam from this victorious hour believe I am other than the expected one, the true Mahdi. Beloveds, it is the hour of prayer.
They mean business, okay, obviously. And we're familiar with this. But in the meantime, in the West, we've got a different style of monarch, okay, than this, okay? This is King Charles V. Charles V spent most of his life fighting in defense of the Catholic faith and the Catholic position, both against the Turks on his eastern flank and also in the religious wars that were the result of the Reformation. He actually packed it in 1558 and said, you know what, I've had enough. I've been fighting this all my life for 40 years. I'm going to retire and I'm going to live next to a monastery. I'm going to spend the rest of the life that I have that's given to me in prayer. And so he built a monastery, a beautiful monastery near one of his favorite parts of Spain, and he spent the rest of his life in a very simple manner. He laid down his crown, he divided up his kingdom, he gave the Spanish parts to his son Philip, he gave the Holy Roman Imperiate to his brother Ferdinand, and away they went. Now, Rome, as I mentioned, was targeted for conquest by the Turks, very seriously building up both on land and on sea a lot of forces. And what was going to be targeted was Malta in 1565. That's what we're going to consider first. And here is a scene of the fortifications of Malta. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. And here is a person that's going to be very important to us, the Grand Master of the Knights of Malta at this time, Jean Peresseau de la Valette. It all started, I think, with the conquest of Rhodes in 1522. Now, Rhodes was that outpost that I mentioned that the Knights of St. John held. They had it, not only, it wasn't just knights that lived there. I mean, there were indigenous people there, Greeks, okay, Christians. And the knights ruled the island, but they worked in close conjunction with the indigenous people. And they felt they were sort of like a West Berlin. If you're old enough to remember, there was that section of Germany that was surrounded by East Germany where they still had freedom. Well, Rhodes was kind of like a sea version of that. And it was a place of refuge for escaping Christians and a place where they could kind of hold their own against the enemy that surrounded them. Well, enter a sultan of Turkey that wants to make sure that for once and for all Islam is going to be established around the world. Suleiman the Magnificent, one of the most powerful Turkish sultans that had ever been. It was his goal to try to end once and for all the false religions that were the offshoot, the infidels that were dominating some of the richest parts of the world. He was going to take that over. And here he is. And you notice that he, is dressed in all the kinds of finery because the people that were conquered had to pay taxes by hook or crook in a way that people who converted to Islam did not. And so if you converted to Islam, you were freed from what was called the jirza, that you a special tax that you basically protection. It was called protection money that you paid, and they became fabulously wealthy. Here, this is a diagram of the central castle of Rhodes, okay, which in 1522 was attacked by a giant flotilla of navy and expeditionary forces led by Suleiman. It was a gigantic and fantastic battle. Remember I told you about that good pope last week who nobody gave a chance to, Adrian VI. He really tried to rally people to try to help the people of Rhodes out, the knights up, but he really didn't get very far. They couldn't muster enough aid to help them, but they held out all by themselves for 6 months. I mean, not giving any inch of ground if they could to all the forces. The guy was throwing away ship after ship, company after company of people at the Knights of Malta. And finally, he offered peace terms to the Knights. He said, look, you've been very brave. You've held out for 6 months. I don't know how you did it, but we will give you an opportunity to surrender with honor. Give us, all we want is the territory, okay? You're going to die. I mean, you're surrounded completely by our forces. We're just, Asia Minor is just across the strait here. It's just a question of time. You're going to die, or you can leave and go somewhere else, and we'll let you go. We'll let you go somewhere else. We'll let you take 50 ships and take your knights, and you can go. And any people that want to go with you, we'll let you take them too. Well, there became a big dispute among the knights as to what they should do. The Grand Master thought, well, gee, these are generous terms. I mean, he's going to let us go with our flags flying and with taking people with us. I don't know. Should we do it? I mean, it just seems like all we're doing is killing, and it's just a question of time. One of the young knights, who was also a knight commander, Jean Perceau de la Valette, the guy that we saw there later, said, no, we can't trust them. These guys are, they don't believe that they owe anything to us because we're infidels. We have to just fight to the end. He says, ask them what they're going to do with the people who are still here in Rhodes. Unless we can guarantee the safety of these people who entrusted themselves to us and who fought with us, for the last 6 months, to the death, I don't think we should compromise with these people. I don't think we should trust them. So they go back to Suleiman. Okay, they go back to Suleiman and say, all right, well, what about it? Will you let the indigenous people, the Greeks, continue to practice Christianity? Will you, not take retribution against them? Will you allow that to happen? He said, yes, we'll give religious freedom. In fact, we'll give you. We won't have anybody taxed. They won't have to pay the jirza for at least 5 years, and for 3 years, anybody that wants to leave Rhodes to go to Crete or go anywhere else where the Christians still are, we'll let them do it. So Valette said, I don't like this. I smell a rat. I don't trust him, all right? But they said, well, no, he's given us his honor. He's on his hand on the Quran. Let's let him do it, okay? Let's stop the killing. Let's give peace a chance, okay? And so what they did is they made a treaty. They fulfilled the first part of it. They gave them 50 ships. And they allowed flags to be flying and drums to be beating, and with heads held high, the knights, move out. And Suleiman is actually there, and he actually acknowledges them. He praises them for their bravery. Off they go, taking on the ship with the people that they could fit on the ships from the island of Rhodes. Not everybody left. Most of the people did not leave because they believed they had heard that a treaty had been struck. They stayed there. But unfortunately, Suleiman did not keep the treaty, and he enslaved all the inhabitants that were left there. He did not allow the other ones to leave once the knights were gone and away. He let the knights leave in peace, but he enslaved the people of the island of Rhodes. And Jean Perceau de Valette never forgot that. he said, I told you, I told you these people are not to be trusted. They don't believe that there is any honor that's involved when you're dealing with people that aren't Muslims. So now these people who were our friends have been enslaved, sent to the harems, all this kind of bad stuff. And I feel guilty about it. And that will never happen again. Never, never, never. Well, Valette ends up being ultimately elected as after a number of years, or years past, the Grand Master of the Knights of Malta. So he's the boss. He's sort of like what we call the provincial, or a lay version of a bishop, the guy in charge of the Knights of Malta around, the Knights around the world. Now, I call them the Knights of Malta for a minute, because as they're kicked out of Rhodes, ultimately the King of Spain said, hey, you don't have any place to go? We'll give you a good place to go. The little island of Malta, right about 80 miles south of the border of Sicily, right between Tunisia and Sicily. It's a perfect place to have your knights there. You can have your outpost. You kind of help protect Christian shipping going through. It'll be perfect for you. And all you have to do is two things. One, have a mass said for the King of Spain once a year. And once a year, because this island is a place where birds stop to nest, on their way across the Mediterranean. Give us one falcon. There's falcons that land here every year. Give us one falcon. That's all we need. The rest of the time, the island of Malta and the subsistence island, the subsidiary island of Gozo, is also yours. So who was this man? He was, of course, a Knight of Malta. He had taken apostolic vows. He took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. He was a lifelong celibate. He was an old guy now by this time. Remember that we're talking about 1565, and the siege of of Rhodes had been 40 years earlier. So 40 years had passed. So he was a man in his 30s when he left Rhodes. Now he's in his early 70s. And he's a hardline veteran. He is, he doesn't trust the Islamic enemy to tell you that today is Thursday. He's going to say, I don't trust anything they say. I saw what they did on Rhodes. A man of total dedication. He loved the military aspect of his vocation, but he also loved the religious aspect of his vocation. He said, hey, I joined this not just to fight, I joined this to defend the people of God. I'm here to give my might for what is right and what is good. And so he was not just a fake soldier of Christ. He regarded himself as a real soldier of Christ, but he also was a hard-headed realist. He said, he didn't think that there were going to be, choirs of angels automatically going before him. He said, if we're going to, be here in the middle of the Mediterranean where all these pirates, these Islamic pirates are going through, we got to know how to defend ourselves. We got to make sure this island is fortified. And so he said, look, we're not going to be sitting ducks here for raiding parties of wild Muslims. We're going to build forts on this island, and we're going to name them after angels and saints. But we're going to build the forts with everything, the best that we can possibly make them, 40-foot walls, so that we can withstand these big cannons that they've got. And and we're going to train. We're going to learn what kind of ships they have. We're going to learn who their troops are. We're going to learn how to fight them. 1565. The Turks say, well, we're going to take Malta out because it's going to be, first of all, they're a total pain. They're right in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea where we're trying to, seize Christian ships. We don't need them stopping us. Instead, it'd be great to have Malta as a staging area for ourselves, because we could go in Malta, build up our army and attack Sicily, and then attack Italy, and then finally get the prize, Rome. Well, Valette has built 3 new forts with 40-foot walls. He's ready he's going to be in there for a long siege if necessary. He's only got 700 knights. That's all that's there. But he's also got 8,000 people of Malta. And the people of Malta are people that the Valette is quite dedicated to. he said, you know, again, these are people who have entrusted their lives to us. These are people who expect us to defend them, and they will also help us defend themselves. They don't want to be subjected to the yoke of an enemy, of someone who wants to wipe out their religion. They're good Catholics, okay? They're going to fight with us, and we're going to defend them. Now, on the other side, okay, the Turkish Navy has 160 giant ships loaded with troops, loaded with cannons, 40,000 men. Do the math. Okay, well, you got 8,700 people against about 40,000. Okay, about, you know, 5-to-1 odds. So there's a lot of people they can throw away to bring Malta down. And they've got just the things to do it. Over 100 giant cannons. Okay, they had developed these cannons for 100 years. These were the cannons that were the later successors of the ones that blew up the walls of Constantinople in 1453. That you know, were supposed to be impregnable, but they blew through them, and they developed even more powerful guns. And they said, we're going to use these guns against his 40-foot walls. So, and they've got some real tough seafaring Muslims who are going to lead this charge. This guy Dragoo is a real sweetheart, okay? He makes his living basically raiding ships and cities along the coast, dragging the people out, selling them into slavery, and pocketing the proceeds for himself, okay? Bad guy, okay? And he, fanatical, anti-Christian. You know, you say, we're doing them some good. They can be slaves to Islam, and maybe they'll learn Islam, and maybe, you know, they'll be saved because they'll become Muslims. Piali Pasha is the son-in-law of Suleiman the Magnificent. So, you know, he's, you know, really high up there, and they both are very skilled in bringing all kinds of special forces and using them. This guy has done, he's kind of the opposite, the opposite of Villet. Villet, you know, has studied the Muslim tactics and the Muslim shipping. He studied the Christian stuff, okay, and he knows how we think, okay, and so he wants to use it against us. And he's also 70-some years old, so he's got a lot of experience behind him. This other guy wants glory. He wants to maybe become, you know, the next sultan. So they want to win at all costs. Now, given the fact that Malta is just the only thing separating this gigantic flotilla of Turkish expeditionary forces, there can be no retreat that's possible. And in fact, the next stop is Sicily. Sicily is under Spanish rule at this time. And the Spanish viceroy basically says, he adds up the numbers for himself, and he says, you know, Malta can't do it. I mean, there's just no way that they can hold out. They're going down. God bless these guys. They're wonderful. But we got to think of Sicily. You know, we got to defend Sicily. So we really can't spare more than a couple of ships. I mean, that's all that we can do because they're coming for us next. Our hope is, or my hope is, says the viceroy, that maybe they'll, you know, weaken the Muslims on the way to Sicily, and by the time they get there, then we'll be able to make a stand and hold them off. So we can't really give them a lot of help. So now, on the other hand, if they give up, if they lose it, if Malta is gone, well, now they've got a wonderful staging area with a short supply line to really pound the southern littoral of Sicily and make a perfect base for invading the rest of Italy. So this, I want to show an American analogy, okay, to the situation of the brave knights and Maltese on Malta in 1565, and it's something that happened 300 years later in 1863 on Gettysburg, Little Round Top. There was also no retreat possible there, and with the lights out, okay, we'll see an analogous situation here.
You are the extreme left of the Union Army. Understood? The line runs all the way from here back to Cemetery Hill, but it ends here. Understood. You cannot withdraw under any condition. If you go, this line will be flanked. If you go, the enemy will sweep up over the hillside and take this entire army from the rear. You must defend this place to the last.
Yes, sir.
Now we'll see how professors fight.
Well, and you probably know the story. Chamberlain, okay, held to the last man, a little round top, and actually charged back ultimately when the Confederates were exhausted at the end of the second day of battle and saved the Battle of Gettysburg. Well, the Maltese are in the same situation. The Union commander is telling them there can be no retreat. The line ends here. If you give up, they take over the high position, they take over the good ground, and they're going to roll us all up. The same thing is in the situation in Malta, which is why I wanted to show it. So Villette decides to address not only his knights, but also the people of Malta. And his address has been preserved. And here it is. It is the great battle of the Cross and the Koran, which is now to be fought. A formidable army of infidels on the point of investing our island. We, for our part, are the chosen soldiers of the Cross, and if heaven requires a sacrifice of our lives, there can be no better occasion than this. Let us hasten then, my brothers, to the sacred altar. There we will renew our vows and obtain by our faith the sacred sacraments, that contempt for death which alone can render us invincible. So basically he's saying, as did William Wallace, everybody has to die. Okay, if we're going to die, what better way to die than right here in the defense of Christendom, in defense of everything we love. So let's do this with God. Okay, let's not give up. Let's keep our eyes fixed on eternity and see. And if we don't even care, whether we die, and if we're fortified by the power of God, then we will be invincible. In Villette in May of 1565, and here they come. May 18th, the Turks arrive, and they have all those 160 ships come pouring people out, surrounding the fortresses, and there's several of them. So I mean, they're and on high positions. So it's going to be work for them, but they come. And they attack the first one, the first fort, Fort St. Elmo, which is the smallest one, okay? But it's on the area near the beach there, and they figured, okay, now if we take this one, then we can use this to bombard the other fortresses, and then we'll be able to roll up on the island. But and wave after wave of men are sent against St. Elmo, but the knights and the others, the Maltese, fight on with everything they've got. Now they send back word to the Grand Master after 8 days of fighting. We can only hold out for another 8 days, and there's just too many of them. They got hundreds for every single one of us. We can hold out for 8 days, but that's all. He said, no, you got to do better than that. If you can't hold out for more than 8 days, I'll come over to Fort St. Elmo and do it myself, but you got to do it. So he prevails upon them, and they keep fighting, okay? They keep they bombard the walls. They bring out the cannons. They they try to tunnel beneath the walls. They put up gunpowder underneath there, mines and explosions. And so, meanwhile, there's only 53 knights left in that fortress on June 3rd. They hold out for more than the 8 days. There's 53 knights left, and then now they send word back to the Grand Master. They said, look, we can't, again, we're outnumbered hundreds to one. Here's what we're ready to do. Yes, we're ready to die for the faith. Why don't we'll go off, we'll charge into them. We'll give up our lives in defense of the faith, and then that'll be it. But we can't hold out. There's just nothing we can do. And he sends back the words, absolutely not. You can't do that. The laws of honor cannot be, this is Villette saying this, cannot necessarily be satisfied by throwing away one's life when it seems convenient. Soldier's duty is to obey. You will tell your comrades that they're to stay at their posts. No, make them kill you. And kill them, okay? Wade into them, okay? Don't just throw your lives away. That's what they want. Let's let them get us, and we'll take we'll take the 10 out for every one of those that they take out. So we'll take 100 out for everyone. So the siege of Malta goes on. They make a night attack, okay, to surprise them. 1,500 Turks are killed, by the knights that are left in Fort St. Elmo. Finally, they send in more of their special forces. They send in 2 kinds of special forces. Janissaries, the ones I told you about before, they had been brainwashed and indoctrinated. And also these Layalars, okay, which were people that apparently they were drugged, kind of drug-induced, kind of fanatics, but they couldn't get through. During the battle, evil old Dragoo, dies in the battle, and that gives a real shot in the arm to the Christian forces all throughout Malta, because now, their gray eminence is gone, and the knights, to show who they really are, decide hey, we're still celebrating the church calendar around here. It's Corpus Christi. We still got the Blessed Sacrament here. What we're going to do is do our Corpus Christi procession right around the walls of St. Elmo. Let people see who we follow, and we're going to be with him one way or another, and we're never leaving him. So that's our strength, the Blessed Sacrament, and so let's show them that we know that our Redeemer lives. 2 days later, okay, they finally throw everything they've got, and they die to the last man. Every single person on St. Elmo dies. Now, the remaining commander, Piali Pasha, said, wow, if this is what we had to pay for this little fort, what's going to happen when we attack the big one? I mean, we're getting a little scared now. So the Turks begin the attacks on the next one. Okay, Fort St. Michael, which is a lot higher up. They send in mines again. Okay, tried to explode underneath the foundations to try to cut through the walls. In fact, they sacrificed some men to do it, a lot of men, but they are able to make a pretty big breach in the wall. But they keep fighting. Now they're wondering about, they send word, hey, we can maybe make a stand, but we're going to have to abandon, the rest of the people of Malta, because we can't fit everybody in the castle. So maybe we ought to send all our knights and our fighting men into this last redoubt here at Fort St. Michael, and we'll abandon the rest of the people because that's the only chance we've got. He said, oh, no. We're in this with the Maltese. I'm not going to do another Rhodes. Okay, the Maltese are our people. We're going to stand together with them to the end. Well, the word of this amazing thing. This is going on months. Okay, and the word gets on to what's going on here. The amazing stand of Malta, the King Philip of Spain, and King Philip says to the viceroy, "What in the world are you doing? These brave men are dying for everything we believe in, and you're sitting here in Sicily? Get out of Sicily and go down there and help them right now. That's an order." All right. So they send another ship full of Spaniards now, fresh, tough, seasoned Spaniards, and now they land on September 7th, and they amass on September 8th. Does that date look familiar to anybody? It's the birthday of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and that wasn't missed on our friends in Malta. Now we've got about equal match. They've killed tens of thousands of Turks, and the Knights of Malta and the Maltese people are still there. And now we got Spaniards coming in, making it a fair fight. And the Turks have lost 30,000 men. They started with 40,000. They've lost 3/4 of them. September 13th, the Turks leave Malta. They say, you know what? We're going home. We can't do it. These people are fanatics. We can't stand it. We're tired. They're not. The Spaniards are here. Let's get out of here. So they leave Malta, and Malta is saved. And, it's a gigantic victory. Italy is no longer going to be under the threat of an invasion. And the new Pope comes in, Pope St. Pius V. His given name was Michele Ghisleri, okay? Dominican. In fact, that's why the popes have gotten white robes, because he continued to wear underneath his papal robes his Dominican habit. and always had been a reformer, always was one of the guys that wanted to see the church adopt its true spiritual position, very devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary, very devoted to the Blessed Sacrament, 100% behind the reforms of the Council of Trent. He was influential in influencing the decisions to go that way. Now, the church is going to be run like a church and not like a political machine or a business. Now, meanwhile, by the way, the commander that coming back from Malta, the Turkish commander, is executed. Okay, and the Turks say, okay, now we're going to regroup, and we're going to make a new navy. Okay, to get together, we'll attack Italy directly. But first, what we ought to do is wipe out some of those islands. We're going to wipe out Cyprus. Get that out of the way. And then we'll come sailing with hundreds of ships for Italy, and this way and we won't get sidetracked with these wild knights of the type of Villette. So the Pope says, okay, what we got to do is we have to find we have to rely on the Blessed Virgin now, okay, to help us. I mean, because right now we need a lot of help. And this seems to be something that is superhuman that's facing us. So we're going to form a holy league, okay, of the countries, the Christian countries, pulling together. Let's put our differences, our competitions, our commercial competitions, our colonial competitions aside, and let's unite against the common enemy. And one person that the Pope really likes is a young, I guess you'd call him a prince, Don Juan of Austria. He's the natural son of Charles V, whose picture we saw before. Charles V, after he was a widower for about 9 years, went for some, saw a singing girl in Germany that he kind of took a liking to, and this is the result of a quick union. But an amazing person. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a minute. But he's able to get a number of people, a number of countries, not all, to say, okay, we'll go along with you, Holy Father. We'll try to make this Holy League and see where it goes. France says, no, not us. Okay, we don't want to get involved. We got a peace treaty with the Turkish Sultan. They're letting us do trade. They're not bothering our ships, so we don't have any beef with them. So if you have got a problem with them, that's yours. Problem, not ours. Sorry. England says, absolutely no. Are you kidding me? You just excommunicated me, says Queen Elizabeth. I'm not going to go anything. Your goose is cooked, and I'm sorry if I'm laughing. And Portugal says, it sounds good, but I wish I could, but we can't. We got too many things going on. Sorry, no. But the league is formed by Spain, Venice, Genoa too. I did include the Papal States, and of course Malta. But the key to it is to have this rosary crusade throughout the world. Everybody who can do anything. The Pope says, everyone say the rosary. We got to put this whole thing in the hands of the Blessed Virgin. I'm asking every single Catholic in the world to say the rosary for victory of the Christian forces. And I like this guy, Don John of Austria, and I'm going to put him in charge of the whole thing. And we've got some good Italian admirals, too, who have a lot of experience. One from Venice, one from Genoa. We'll have those two old rivals together, and they know a lot about seafaring, and they'll be part of this, too. They'll help Don John. Cyprus, okay, is attacked by the new Sultan. Okay, he's called Selim the Sat because even though you're not, as a Muslim, you're not supposed to drink. Well, he did anyway, and he liked drinking a lot. He probably was an alcoholic, but that's why they call him Selim the Sat. Okay, but unlike Suleiman, who had some honor, Selim had no quarter, no honor. And what he did when it was another big fight on Cyprus, but he then talked peace, offered favorable terms. Again, these were the Venetians now that occupied Cyprus. They said, okay, we'll take you up on it. And as soon as the men at arms laid down their arms, he slaughtered them. He wasn't even as good as Suleiman. Selim had no honor whatsoever. He slaughtered the guys that's honorably surrendered, and he slaughtered and despoiled the rest of Cyprus. Then he did some raids and did the same thing to Corfu, and they had a special lot of fun destroying churches, like we've seen in the Near East, in the last few years. Don John doesn't like any of this, okay, and he's called often the last crusader, okay. And why? Who was he? Okay, amazing life. He said he didn't know his own identity for a long time. As a natural son, okay, he was not part of the royal family at all. He was brought up, his father knew who he was, he acknowledged him, but he had him brought up in humble circumstances. It's almost like a fairy tale. What he did is he, almost like Cinderella or Snow White or something, but it's true, he had him raised by good, at first, good and loyal middle-class farmers, okay, subsistence farmers, good Catholics. He wanted to make sure they were good Catholics. They brought him up. The name that this young man went by as a kid was Jerome, Geronimo, okay, he was called. The kid always was quite religious. I mean, his foster parents were religious, and he was too. He always had a rather serious interior life. As he got older, one day, is just like a preteen of a 6th or 7th grade kid in today's standards, he was, the farmers were greeted by, well-dressed people from the royal court who said, you never knew who this was that you were taking care of, but he's a very important person. He's got to get the education suited to his proper rank. So he's being taken to the capital, and he's going to be well treated, and thank you for what you've done. Well, this kid who had been wearing simple clothes now is given royal clothing, taken away to the palaces of Spain, taken to the universities, okay, and he knows, he's told that he's someone important. He doesn't know exactly who he is. He thinks he might be the child of some famous person, but he doesn't know who. But he, again, as a devout Catholic, they're very serious about continuing his formation as a Catholic. He considers the priesthood. And in fact, it's known that in his father's will, he said, I think this kid should be a priest, okay? That would be a good place for him. But on the other hand, he, likes a military vocation. As he's going and he meets other people in the area, hearing the stories of fighting for Christendom in various parts of the world, he says, this is what I want to do. I want to become a military man, and I want to be like these Knights of Malta. In fact, in 1565, he decides he volunteers to go to Malta. He said, these guys, these good Catholics here are beleaguered. I want to get and he actually goes to the port to sign up to join the relief expedition to go to Malta to help them. And he's stopped by King Philip. He said, look, you are my brother. You are a prince of Spain, okay, whether you know it or not. We are not going to throw your life away from this. No, if you want to be in the military, I'll have jobs for you to do, okay? But not this, okay? Because your life will probably be lost, and we need you. You're still a young man. You're in your 20s. No, it's an order, okay? Now, he always had a tremendous sense of fairness and justice. He never, I mentioned he volunteered for Malta. He never regarded his enemies, okay, or the enemies of Spain, as being just subhuman. He always was willing to listen to what their beefs were, to find out, why are you fighting Spain? What is your whole reason? And if they had legitimate beefs, he'd pay attention to them. So there was a rebellion of Moorish converts, okay, the so-called Moriscos, okay, people who had originally been Moorish residents of Granada, but were treated really as like about fifth-class citizens in Spain at the time, and they didn't trust them. They were rather poorly catechized, or minimally catechized. They indeed had been baptized Catholics now, but they were mounting a rebellion, and they couldn't be defeated for a long time. But they sent Don John down to fight these Moorish rebels, and Don John not only beat them, but he also won them over. Why? Because they saw he was a fair guy. He was a legit, upfront, stand-up guy. And when he made promises to them, he kept them. And they said, this guy's okay. And so he became really kind of the toast of Spain. And that word got all around Europe, including to Pope Pius. And he volunteered. He said, I am willing to fight for you, Your Holiness. This is the kind of thing that I've been training for all my life. I'd like to be fighting for you. He said, not only will you be fighting for me, I want you to be the commander of the forces. He had received a little experience after the Morisco War. He had actually joined the Spanish Navy in doing police work, so kind of anti-piracy work in the Mediterranean. So he also knew how the Muslims operated. He knew what their tactics were. So he was a pretty good choice. Now, he also took very seriously the crusader aspect of this event. Each person of the thousands that were going to be part of this force going on were not only issued, swords and pistols. Each person was given a rosary and told to use it. He said, the Pope has asked us all to say the rosary. We each are going to say the rosary every night on this ship, every single man, because we cannot do this without the Blessed Virgin, and we need your help as much as we need your straight shooting. Well, the Muslim fleet, after having harassed the Ionian Islands, Corfu, Kefalonia, and those islands there off the west coast of Greece, had gone in for shelter to the Gulf of Corinth. And if you remember how Greece is set up, there's sort of like a little broom connected by a small neck on the southern part of Greece, the Peloponnesus, okay? And they are between in that gulf that is just west of the Isthmus of Corinth, the little neck that unites that to the rest of Greece. Don John decides to sail right into them and surprise them. And here comes the troops, here comes the ships. The Muslims have more ships than the Christians do. Don John leads the front ship, the flagship, and the major body of the troops, and flanked by either side of some of the best admirals that he had going against the Muslims, and with Santa Cruz, the Admiral Santa Cruz in the rear, ready to swing to the right or to the left as needs, to the left or to the right as needs be, depending on who needs more help. And actually, the way that this comes in is the Turks suddenly saw these guys coming in on October 7th, 1571, which kind of made the form of a cross with Don John right out in the front, and on the front of his ship is an image of Christ on the cross, Christ crucified, which is a bugaboo actually for the Muslims. They don't believe that Christ really died on the cross for reasons that are irrelevant here. But anyway, it was something that was he was highlighting. And Andrea Doria has got on his side a picture given to him by the King of Spain of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Okay, so they're going in literally not just with the banners of the countries flying, but with the banners of the Holy League represented by Christ and his Blessed Mother. And what happens is the wind suddenly shifts. And as the Christian fleet starts going against the Muslims, the wind fills their sails and goes a lot faster. The Muslims are bunched up basically in a bottleneck, and their advantage of having more ships does not become an advantage because they're just kind of boxed in, and with the cannons and so forth, and actually the hand-to-hand fighting that occurs on this, the Christians really bottle them up, take them by surprise, and capture and sink all kinds of ships, including right in the beginning, Ali Pasha, the head guy, the head Turkish admiral's ship goes down. The green flag with all the names of Allah on them is struck down, and the flag of Christ is put up instead. That kind of demoralizes, some of the other ships, and with an all-day battle, the Christians come in. It's always looked at as something this is an idealized version, obviously, but it was looked at as Our Lady was the one that provided that wind. Our Lady was the one that guided the ships into victory. Our Lady was the real victor of the Battle of Lepanto. Originally, at the beginning of the battle, there's 300 Turkish ships and only 200 ships of the Holy League. But as it goes on, there's 8,000 Turks killed and 10,000 captured. 117 of the ships are captured. Turk ships are now becoming Christian ships, and 50 of them are sunk. So the ones that are escaped are far less than half. A lot of good men die in the Holy League too, about 7,500, but only 12 Catholic ships are lost, and 12,000 Christian galley slaves are freed. All these guys like Ben-Hur are rowing the boat on the boat. Oh, this is a nice thing. They got the word, some of them, that Don John was coming. And so over the night, they started, on some of the ships, they started, these Christian galley slaves started trying to pull through and saw through their chains so they could get out. At one point during the midst of the battle, a bunch of the slaves rebel, and join on the side of their fellow Christians, Don John and the others. In the meantime, Don John had done the opposite. He said, anyone who's a condemned criminal here during this battle, we're taking your chains off. Because these guys want to put chains on you, we don't. We want, even though you're condemned criminals, a lot of you, we're going to regard you as free people, because we're fighting for the freedom of Christianity. We're fighting for the freedom of your souls. So fight with us, row with us, and we're going to win. So it was an entirely opposite situation. Now, October 7th, 1571, Pope Pius V, sitting in a meeting in Rome, suddenly stops the meeting and looks out the window toward the east. They said, Your Holiness, what's the matter? What do you see? He said, ring all the bells of Rome. Our Lady has just given a great victory to Don John and to the Christian forces. Okay, ring the bells, ding dong, ding dong. And, no one knows how he knew it, but indeed it was true. He's the Pope, so they took his word for it. And it turned out it was true. Not only was it true, the victory happened on the day he said it did. It was the end of the invasion plan, by sea from that point on. It really did demolish the Turkish Navy, and they ceased to. They continued to be a local threat. The piracy still continued to be a problem even into the 1800s. But it was they didn't have the forces anymore to mount a full-fledged naval attack on Italy and Spain and on the Christian heartland in Europe. Now, as this ends, as we come to the close of this particular segment, it's, I think, important to realize that it's not just a military thing that turned the tide here. In 1622, 5 great saints were canonized at once in a beautiful ceremony in Rome. 4 of the 5 were all people who were very important to the spiritual renewal of the Catholic Church in the 1500s. One of them was not from that era, but he was important to that era nevertheless for reasons we're going to say in a minute. Who are these 5 saints? First, St. Ignatius Loyola, and there he is. Man who had himself been a soldier, and a good one, interested in God, gold, and glory, but reading the life of Christ and the life of the saints during the convalescence, he decides to enter into a great period of spiritual discernment, to look at the way to heaven being the primary way to travel, and the way of the world being a way that would just lead to the grave, So to look for the king that was going to last, he forms an army, a company of Jesus, which was not just, even though it was organized with military discipline, military lines, it was the spiritual means that were going to be first. Everyone had to undertake a true spiritual conversion before a vocation to the Jesuits was going to be allowed. One of his first disciples was St. Francis Xavier, who he met as a fellow student, even though he was much younger. St. Ignatius later in life goes into the studies. He meets a fellow Basque, Francis Xavier, one of the first Jesuits, and he ends up, taking very seriously the spiritual exercises, taking very spiritually, to having everything be for the greater glory of God. God first, And he becomes one of the greatest missionaries the world has ever seen. He goes to India. He goes to Japan. He was on the brink of going to China when unfortunately he died. But thousands and thousands of converts because of St. Francis Xavier, a man who, because of his great union with God, did things that were considered to be impossible. Others, St. Teresa of Avila, if there was ever someone who knew what the love of God was like, who found God already, as a nun, but recognized that she was a rather lukewarm nun, wanted to go further, engaged in this dialogue, this loving dialogue with God that's going to transform her, and it does transform her. She enters a reform of the Carmelite order, which becomes a powerhouse of spiritual renewal, first throughout Spain and then throughout the world. And one of my favorites, St. Philip Neri. Philip Neri comes to Rome after the sack of Rome. Rome is devastated. Rome is before the Council of Trent. It doesn't know which way it's going to go. As a layman, he gets his friends to start praying. He gets into the typical discussions, bull sessions that all young men get into all the time. And when they're discussing the problems of Catholicism, and they're discussing the problems of the world, and they're discussing the problems of Rome, he says, but gentlemen, when are we going to begin to be good? What about us? When are we going to begin to be good? And because he was such a humble and sincere and honest and true blue type guy, definitely a guy of interior life, he starts converting his friends. Okay, he starts bringing them to a greater awareness of what's really important in life. As a man 40 years old, his spiritual director tells him, Philip, you're so good with people. You get them going for God. Why don't you become a priest? He goes, I'm not cut out to be a priest. That's not for me. I'm just an ordinary Joe. He says, no. You got to be a priest. And so he does. And let's get back. And as a priest, he becomes a magnificent confessor, and bringing all kinds of people, finding what their talents are, bringing those talents out, always dedicating to God. Some of them became great composers. Some of them became cardinals. Some became popes. Okay, some of his friends became popes. They offered him the cardinalate several times, but he said, nah. He made a joke out of it. He sent the cardinal's hat back on a donkey. Okay, and he said, the donkey deserves this hat more than I do. I'm not taking it. And so, but yet he impacted all kinds of people because he took very seriously that question. Gentlemen, when are we going to be good? Not when is the cardinal going to be good, not when is the archbishop going to be good, but when are we going to really be good? And he impacted people. And of course, and finally, with these spiritual giants was also canonized a layperson. St. Isidore, a guy who lived hundreds of years before, but a common laborer who nevertheless couldn't get himself away from the Blessed Sacrament, knew that that's where life was, that's where his strength was, held up as a model for the Catholic laity because, with Christ inside us, we can do all sorts of things. It's a transforming fire that comes about. That transforming fire existing in people who were lay people, like Villette. Even though, he was actually, I guess he'd be classified as a religious, since he was under holy vows. But yet, he, other than in choir practice or something, he didn't really wear robes. But yet this idea that he himself was responsible for those people. He himself had to follow the teachings of Christ and live them. He himself had to lay down his life. He transforms Malta. He saves an impossible situation where it was written off into being a victory for Christian forces. And John of Austria, man who also in the past had his dalliances, as a young man, but came back and knew that his dedication to God was the most important thing. He was ready to lay his life down for God. When he ultimately died, fighting for his country in the Netherlands against the rebels there, his death was extremely holy. And they found among his papers his own prayer book that he used every day, his spiritual diary, which was quite profound. It was the fire that he had transformed each of these men, made them both capable of doing things that ordinary people couldn't do. A great saint that we love around here, St. Jose Maria, used to always say, add us up. We don't add up to much. 1 + 1 = 2, but add God to the end of that equation. And the zeros become infinite. We have infinite power at that point. And that's what these men clicked into. That's what these men plugged into, receiving that life of Christ. They ended up, St. Peter's Basilica We saw last week the old version of St. Peter's Basilica. Pretty nice. You know, it was an impressive place. Built over the tomb of St. Peter, so that's good by itself. But the new one that's built is even better than the old. Now it had been purified. Now it had seen both the genius and the passion, the pathos of the suffering that had gone, the contradictions, the difficulties, the wars, now had created a masterpiece that was better than what was before. And I think that's something that we can see here as part of our way out. Christ brings us this life. The saints bring us Christ. When will we really begin to be good, as St. Philip Neri said? And if so, the resurrection that we have could be even better than the life that was there before.